Welcome to our channel. Click the subscribe button below if you want to see more content like this. Today we will talk about David Berkowitz, a serial killer who terrorized New York streets. David Berkowitz had a difficult childhood. His mother was a Jew who gave birth to a baby girl with her Italian boyfriend. But after her boyfriend's family opposed their marriage, Betty took her child and left home. After a while, Betty had a relationship with a few more people and gave birth to David Berkowitz out of wedlock. David's father was married to someone else and broke up with Betty, after which she started looking for a family that would adopt David. On June 1, 1950, she gave birth to David and gave him up for adoption to a Jewish couple named Nathan and Pearl Berkowitz. David's step-parents had no children of their own and gave a lot of care and attention to him. However, his new family was not very sociable, and David grew up as an introverted child. When he started school, he was a big boy and caught attention. However, being an introvert, David could not make friends and was not social. Although being a good baseball player, he could not make friends among athletes, and this loneliness made David more angry. When David was a young boy, his stepmother got a cancer and died in 1960, succumbing to the disease. This shook David to the core. His grades at school got worse and he no longer had faith in God. He believed that his mother's death was part of a plan to destroy him. In 1970, his father married another woman who didn't get along with David very much. After the couple moved to Florida, David didn't join them. His stepfather abandoned David. David had a best friend whom he considered to be his girlfriend. But this relationship was only in David's imagination, as his female friend had not considered him to be her boyfriend. David enrolled for a semester at the public school in Bronx and took a few courses. His only goal was to please his father, but this didn't last long. In 1971, he enlisted in the Army. David Berkowitz spent 3 years in the Army where his interest in rifles started. David was good at shooting. While in the Army, David was thinking about his mother and started searching for her. After finding his mother Betty and his sister Rosalind, David would visit his family on weekends, but this did not last long. His visits became less frequent and then he disappeared completely. By the time he returned from the Army in 1970, he hadn't had any positive experience with women. His only affair was with a sex worker during his military service, after which he lost interest in sexual intimacy. He now hated women. He developed a new perversion and committed 1488 acts of arson, large and small scale, in New York. People who commit arson get pleasure from the great damage they cause. David was committing arson and watching the damage he would cause. By late 1974, he sent a letter to his father in which he explained his pessimism and wrote that all people were against him. He believed that people would spit in his face and make fun of him. As his condition worsened, he would go out only when he had to buy food. While being alone at home, he always dreamt of doing horrible things to people. He thought that this was how he would be accepted in the society. Soon David bought a large knife and began following women walking alone in the streets. On New Year's Eve on 1975, he spotted a woman leaving the grocery store. He sneaked up behind her and hit her in the back with his big knife. The woman started running away and screaming. David did not follow her. She was not seriously injured. On the same night, he spotted a 15-year-old girl, sneaked up behind her and jumped on her. He started hitting her in the head with a knife. Frightened by the screams, David left the girl and ran away. Michelle was not dead, but she had serious injuries. David fled again without being seen by anyone. David Berkowitz was relieved after these attacks. He started working in a security company in the same year. He left Bronx and moved to a house after paying a deposit of $200, but the house was making David extremely uncomfortable. He was incredibly disturbed by the sounds of the city and his neighbors' dogs. He believed that the devil was trying to communicate with him through the dogs. The devil was constantly telling him to do terrible things. He couldn't stand dogs anymore. He left the house without even taking his deposit back. He moved to a new flat. The owner of the house was Sam Carr, a retired municipal worker. He had a black Labrador dog. The sound of the dog was disturbing David. The devil was communicating with him through this Labrador dog. That's why he even tried to burn the dog, but failed. Apart from the dog, his neighbor Sam Carr was also communicating with him through signals he sent to David. He wanted him to cover New York in blood. He believed that he was the embodiment of the devil. Even though David tried to suppress these voices, he was completely defeated. He believed there was a father-son relationship between him and Sam. David Berkowitz's father was Devil Sam. He would later tell the police that he got the nickname Son of Sam from his landlord Sam. Before committing his first murder, David left the security firm and started working in a taxi company. He fell in love with a girl named Donna Laura, so much so that he believed she would be resurrected and be with him. In July 1976, he started terrorizing the streets of New York, one of the largest cities in the world. Donna and her friend Jody had parked a car in front of Donna's house in Bronx. Jody had dropped her friend at home. Donna's family was waiting for her to enter the house. Meanwhile, a man approached the car. Donna asked Jody whether she knew him. Before she could get an answer, the man fired shots until he emptied the magazine of the .44 caliber gun he had hidden in the newspaper in his hand. Donna died after being shot in her neck, but Jody was shot in her calf. When David ran out of bullets, he started running away from the area. Donna's father, who heard the gunshot from inside the house, came running to the car and saw his daughter in blood. He immediately called the ambulance, but Donna had already passed away. David Berkowitz later confessed to the police that it was Sam who wanted David to commit this murder. The police could not come to any logical conclusion. There was not a single reason for the murder. Terrified Jody described the suspect to police as follows: a white male with dark, wavy hair and in his 30s. On October 23, 1970, 12 weeks after the murder of Donna, a man named Carl was hanging out with his friends for a farewell party before joining the Air Forces. His girlfriend Rosemary was with him. When Carl took Rosemary to her house, Sam's son appeared again. He approached the couple who were saying goodbye for the last time in the car in front of the house. The man came up to the car and fired shots 5 times. Carl was shot in his head. Rosemary started a car in panic and rushed him to the hospital. His life was saved, but he continued to live with a metal plate throughout his life. His dream to join Air Forces was never fulfilled. Sam's son David was spreading terror in the streets of New York. John and Christine, a couple that was driving home at midnight in 1970, also had an unfortunate encounter with this man. As soon as they got into the car, David started shooting at them with his gun. All of the bullets hit Christine. John rushed her to the hospital, but Christine could not be saved and passed away. David Berkowitz was still living in the same house. He was becoming increasingly disturbed by the sound of the dog. He left a note on Sam's postbox, threatening that he would kill him if he didn't stop his dog from making noises. David was extremely sensitive about dogs and was serious in his threats. However, Sam Carr's complaint about the letter was ignored by the police, until a week later, when a gunshot was heard in the backyard of the house. When Sam Carr ran towards the garden, his Labrador dog was shot and lying on the ground covered in blood. Sam saved his dog's life by immediately taking him to the veterinarian. Now Sam Carr realized that he was in serious danger. He called the police once again and made them investigate the case. Police took the letter for investigation. David had taken New York City hostage. Girls in the street had even cut their hair short to avoid being noticed. The situation was so grave that the largest task team in the history of New York was established. As the events in New York City began to escalate, the New York Police Department assigned Detective Joseph Coffey and Captain John Borelli the task of finding the murderer. When they started investigating the incident, they focused on 2 possibilities. The attacker was either a crazy person or someone who had enmity with Christine, who had been killed. The detective pointed out that the gun that was fired was large, When the investigation was further expanded, similarities emerged in the following crimes. There was a murderer using a .44 caliber gun. A special group named Omega was formed to find him. The group was led by Captain Morelli. The investigation revealed that the weapon used was a .44 caliber Charter Arms Bulldog. So who was the lunatic who used this gun? Situation in New York became increasingly tense. The murderer was choosing his victims randomly, thus a profile about him could not be created. The New York Police Department decided to establish a group that would conduct a more detailed investigation. Timothy Dowd, an English language and literature major, was appointed as the head of the task force group. Another attack took place on April 17, 1970. A young couple was kissing at the Hutchinson River in the parking lot. David approached the young couple in his car and shot each of them 2 times. The girl died instantly. Her boyfriend, Alexander, could not be saved even though he was taken into surgery. This time, the murderer left a letter to Captain Borelli. He wrote on the letter. In the letter, he referred to himself as the son of Sam. He wrote the following to the captain. Dear Captain Joseph Borelli, I'm very sorry that you refer to me as a misogynist, but I'm not. I'm a monster. I'm the son of Sam. When Father Sam is drunk, he gets cruel and beats his family. Sometimes he ties me behind the house. Sometimes he locks me in the garage. Sam likes to drink blood. Father's son orders me to go out and kill. Many people are buried behind our house. Most of them are young. Some of them were raped. Some are chopped and their blood is drunk. Only their bones are left. When Father locks me in the attic, I see the outside world through the window. I feel abandoned. I am different from everyone else. I am programmed to kill. You need to kill me in order to stop me. Attention, all police. Shoot me first, shoot to kill or else. Keep out of my way or you will die. I love hunting. Prowling the streets looking for fair game, tasty meat. The women of Queens are the prettiest of all. I must be the water they drink. I live for the hunt, this is my life. I don't want to kill any more, no sir. No more, but I must. Honor thy father. I want to make love to the world. I love people. I don't belong to the earth. Return me to Yahoos. I want to address the people of the Queens. I love you. I wish you all a happy Easter. May God bless you in this world and the next one. David had a symbol that he always used in his letters. He was sending many letters to the police, newspapers. He wanted the terror that he created to spread. This satisfied him. For serial killers, hearing their name and being noticed is a great source of pleasure. By using this method, David was satisfying his needs and found a great motivation to continue with his crimes. The police department immediately examined the letter in depth, but could not find any fingerprints. When the letter was leaked to the press, the world became familiar with the son of Sam. The people of New York could no longer walk freely on the streets because David was choosing his victims randomly. This created panic in the streets. Everyone was expecting answers from the police. New York police were searching for David like crazy. Most of them would spend sleepless nights to find the murderer. They were looking for clues. On June 10, David's former landlord, Jack Casora, found an interesting card in his mailbox. The card came from someone named Sam Carr, who was expressing his sympathy over his falling from the rooftop. Jack Casora was surprised as he had never had such an accident. Jack found Sam's number in the address book. When he called Sam asking him who he was and telling him about the card, Sam got surprised because he had not sent such a letter. The two men decided to meet. Meanwhile, Sam Carr called the police to update them about this new development. Sam was trying to find a person who shot his dog, Jack Casaron's 19-year-old son Stefan, who overheard the conversation, stated that he suspected someone. The person he suspected was their former tenant, David Berkowitz. He was a weird man who did not get along well with his dogs during his tenure and left the house suddenly. This name was given to the police and searched in the system. It was an ordinary man whose home address was registered and whose driver's license was confiscated due to a fine. The anniversary of Donna Laura's death was approaching. New York police and residents were apprehensive due to the possibility of another murder occurring on that day. 2 days later, Son of Sam appeared again. A young couple named Stacy and Bobby were having a romantic evening. Suddenly, Stacy panicked. What if Son of Sam showed up? Despite Bobby's assurances, Stacy wanted to leave. They got in the car, and right after a short kiss, they felt a buzzing in their ears. Bobby was seriously injured. The police came to the scene and took them both to the hospital, but Stacy died in the hospital. On the night of this murder, a very important incident took place. This time, there was an eyewitness. A man who was in his car in the parking lot saw the killer clearly, a slightly chunky white man with dark hair. A few days after the attack, the police were discussing the complaint filed by someone. They decided to investigate in detail the person named David Berkowitz, against whom the complaint had been made. They found out that David lived in flat number 35 in Pine Street. Moreover, according to the data they obtained, David Berkowitz was directly matching the profile of Son of Sam. The two officers found the real estate agent who rented the house. Lease contract identified David as working in a security company. They called the security company and asked whether there was such an employee. The company said that he left a year ago and started working in a taxi company. There were many taxi companies in New York. The police officers immediately reported the issue to their chief, after which a detective was appointed to investigate the case. The officers gave the letters from the murderer to the detective. The detective thought that it was an important clue and sent the letter to the Omega Group established to arrest David. On the same day, fire was reported in the building where David lived. The man who reported the fire was a male healthcare worker. When Officer Chamberlain arrived in the scene, the fire was extinguished, but he saw bullets. Someone had fired shots to increase the flame. Moreover, the health worker showed the officer the letters he had been receiving from his neighbor David Berkowitz. There was no name on the letter, but the man was convinced that it was his neighbor sending those letters. When the officer compared the letter to that written to Sam Carr, he noticed that the handwriting was the same. Meanwhile, he went to the Omega Group and left a copy of the letters to them. Now David Berkowitz's case was being solved. On August 10, Omega Group surrounded David Berkowitz's house. David left his house and got into his car. Meanwhile, the police came to him with their guns and demanded him to surrender. David surrendered without putting up any resistance. David's trial began. The psychiatrists hired by the defense group diagnosed him as paranoid schizophrenic, but David rejected this diagnosis. For many serial killers, accepting this amounts to rejecting their own selves. Many serial killers committed murders to establish themselves in the society. David Berkowitz accepted all the charges at the first hearing and was sentenced to 365 years in prison. David has been in prison since 1970. While in prison, he became interested in religion and converted to Christianity. When his release was brought up in 2002, he rejected this request. He believed that his release would be unfair to his victims' family members. David Berkowitz is now 70 years old and continues to live in prison.